and yet she still wanted to honor her today. And I don't know the hand signals from back there. Okay. I'm on. Okay. Anyway, she wanted to honor her mother, and so we put those flowers back there. My grandmother, many called her Grandma Marshall, but she was also a very godly example, and she never stopped being a mother. And I've shared this story many times. We went to visit her one time, and she was just a little short thing, and we went to visit her, and my sister started telling her that my mom wasn't going to church, hadn't been going to church. And she just wanted to get her going, you know. And so my grandma, this little thing, grabbed my mom and pushed her up against the wall and said, "You better not stop going to church." And then we just like, Grandma, she's just joking. She's going to church. It's okay. But she never stopped being that mother who wanted to make sure her children were in church and doing the right thing. So we can never stop doing that. You become a grandmother, great-grandmother, and some go on to be great-great-grandmothers. You can never stop looking at your children and just saying, you know, are you doing everything okay? Is everything all right? And it's very important. Today, the title today is The Greatest Gift, which is in the bag in front of me, and you will see it at the very end. I like to say I'm extremely happy to have my mother here today. We beginning of the week, didn't think she was going to be here. It was kind of a scary time. And of course, if you've ever been with me in the hospital, I just take over. And if things are not being done right, I will say, this needs to be done. So I was doing a little bit of that. Sister Karen saw me in action one time with that. But I like to see people taken care of. So we went to the hospital, and I made sure things were taken care of. I went by to see Sister Debbie. Her Sister Debbie and my mom, if nobody knows, had planned a trip this past Tuesday. They were going to go down to Mechanicsburg and go shopping at Boscov's. That's what they were going to do. Tuesday, they were both in the hospital. So they were saying this morning they're never going to make that plan again. They're just going to, I guess, wing it, do it spontaneously or something. In the ER, my mom was right down the hall from Sister Debbie. When they were into the hospital, she was right down the hall. So kind of made it convenient. But I stopped in. Well, when Debbie was in the beginning, I stopped in and I said, "I don't think you should go home. I don't think you should go home." But they didn't listen to me. But anyhow, I'm so glad to have both of them here this morning. It's been a very eventful week, to say the least. But here we are, Mother's Day, and we're together, all together. Matthew 7:11 says, "If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask?" The gifts that we give to our children and to those following us or looking at us, they need to, and I think, well, my mother was mentioning, which really confirmed what I was speaking today, because she was saying about you have to love these people with a godly love. And my message this morning says a lot of things that she had talked about. But we have to, if God knows how to give good gifts to us, or if we know how to give good gifts to our children, then God also gives good gifts to us. And so in the Bible, there's always, for everything that we need to do, there is an example of what that is supposed to be. Being a mother is a job that you never retire from. You can't say, "Oh, got this many years in, done." No, doesn't happen. unfortunately, there's many mothers who feel that way. They get so far and they're done. But your heart cannot ever tell you you're done. No matter how much you say, you know, I'll say to my husband sometimes, say, let's just run away when things get overwhelmed. And he said, well, where will we go? I said, I don't know, just run away. He said, but I would miss the kids and the grandkids, and you still have that tie to your children and your grandchildren that you cannot become trying to think of the word, but you cannot become unattached. You cannot become unresponsible. I guess what I want to say. You are always responsible, and so taking on that job is sometimes very tiring, very overwhelming, and sometimes you do want to just run away, but you can't. It's sometimes my son, I'll think of him, like when he goes over to Harrisburg to work and it's raining or something, I'm like, oh, he's just too young to be doing that. He's 33 years old. Now, when is he going to be old enough to do that? In my eyes, never. But you still worry about him. So those of you who have little kids and you think, someday I'm not going to worry so much. No, it doesn't happen. Doesn't happen at all. You still worry. And I'm speaking about good mothers. If you are a good, loving mother, you love your children, you're thankful for your children, you will never, ever, ever stop worrying for them, wanting to make sure they have it. I get my mom goes shopping. She buys way more stuff at the grocery store than she will ever eat. And then I go over to her house and she says, well, here, I'm not going to eat this, so you take this. And then she does the same thing to my son when he goes over. And I say, I really think she just buys all this stuff to give to us. I don't think she really buys it to eat. Because as a mother, you are constantly thinking about them. Because you think, well, I'm not going to eat this, but maybe they will. And that's a good mother. You give good gifts to your children. I'm going to talk about different gifts, both spiritual and natural, how they've changed over the years. Years ago, the dolls. Now this is probably, this is much more modern of a doll than they have it. It's kind of an example or remake. But the dolls, you just carried them around. Now Amelia's very good with this because she carries them around and she has a story to tell with it. So she always has this something going on. But there was these dolls. They don't even sit up very well. I was looking on the internet and I see they have this doll that you can buy. The doll breathes. The doll has a heartbeat. That's just weird. But yeah, I'm sure it wets its diaper. Maybe more. But that, I mean, okay, so I'm going to get to imagination, but it takes imagination away, and it is just weird to have a baby doll that breathes, and it looks like a real baby. These babies, they would just hold and, oh, my baby's crying, wah, wah, it's crying. That's what they did. They had an imagination. And boys, I guess, there is a difference, but boys had toys like this. Oh no. So this toy, that they would have, you know what they did? They pushed it. Can you imagine that? It was child powered and not battery powered. You didn't push a button and just watch the toy go around and watch the toy go here and go there and eat your snack and then push the button. You actually took this toy and you pushed it and you made sounds, which I am not going to attempt to do because I'm not very good at that. They just will not come out right. They played outside. They had imagination. You could watch them. You could, if you listen to them, they were telling stories, And not all children have gone from that. There are still children around who do that. But back then, that's all they had. The children, they had to invent, they had to create, they had to use their brain to do stuff. They didn't just push buttons, pull chains, whatever to make things go. Control. You know, they kind of turn into zombies after a while. And if some kids, though, if they look at a toy and the screen doesn't tell them what to do or which button to push, they have no idea. No idea. Years ago, my son had a friend. My son was about 5, and his friend was there, and Josh had these toys and cars or something, and the little boy says, "But what does it do?" And my husband said, "Well, you push it, you go and." But what does it do? That's what it does. What you make it do. That's what it does. So we have to give our kids the gift of imagination. If everything they have does everything by itself, then children will lack motivation, and everything they have in the natural will spill over into the spiritual. They won't be able to sing that song, "I Can Only Imagine." Will they then lose hope and have no desire for heaven because you can't show it to them on a screen? Will they lose the desire to read the scriptures because it isn't acted out for them? They won't know how to talk to anyone about Jesus because with losing the imagination, they've lost the ability to speak to other people. I'm going to put this out here to represent imagination. Now, you or I probably has no clue what this is. I don't have a clue. I know I was told, but I don't remember. But the child who built this could give you a full explanation of what this is, okay? Because they have an imagination. Now, you may look at it and just say it's a truck, but oh no, I'm sure it's much, much, much more than just a truck. I think there's supposed to be, this is some sort of little restaurant back here, if I remember correctly. But that is with an imagination. And when you can think, then you can read the Bible and you can just imagine what it was like, when Peter was there and Paul, and when the day of Pentecost, you can imagine that. Because you don't have to look at a screen to tell you what it was like. You don't have to have a play or a movie go before you and show you what it's like. You can imagine. When I was young, I loved to read. I still do, but I don't read near as much as I did when I was younger. And in my mind, I would have the house in the story imagined. I would know where the bedrooms were, and where the kitchen was, and how the backyard looked. In my mind, I don't know if that's what the author had in mind, but that's what was in my mind. Right. Because it wasn't painted out for me. I grew up without television, without videos, without video games, without all of that. Need a gift of imagination. The next thing I'd like to talk about is giving your child the gift of history. Now, children in the modern world, and maybe not all of them, but a lot of them, don't know how to address a letter. The only addresses they are familiar with end in .com, .net, etc. You can't put this on an envelope, and even if you could, would they know how many stamps to put on, or what a stamp was? It's just a foreign concept because nobody does snail mail anymore. But it is so refreshing when you know that somebody sat down, wrote out a card, put it in an envelope, addressed the envelope, put a stamp on it. Had to buy the stamp. Take it down and put it in the mailbox and send it to you. Now, that shows a lot of time and thought other than a text or an email. Hey, how are you? Now, granted, we all do it. I do it. I'm guilty of it, and I'll say I am. But that bit of communication has been lost. So how do we know how to take time to communicate with God? If we kneel down and he's not there like that, in the instant of a text going through, we're done, you know? If we can't just take him along with us while we're shopping and say, hey, God, what do you think about this? You know, and just keep shopping. And how are we going to have the ability to do that if some technology is good. I'm not denying that. But if that's all we hold on to. So you need to teach them the history of how people used to communicate. If they were going to have an event, they would go through this big thing of the invitations and you know, welcoming their guests and all of that. Do they know anything about that? So how can they be welcoming to other people when it concerns bringing them to God? They don't know how to write a check. After all, they have their debit card. So some of them don't know the value of money because they never see actual money. I was at a restaurant recently, and one of the older ladies told me that in the register they have to label the quarters, dimes, nickels, because the younger kids don't know what they are. And yeah, well, it's not taught a lot of it. But so they have no idea of actual money, how hard you have to work to make this money, and how you have to save this money and do something with this money. So how are they going to understand how a church operates and how money's needed for that, and how to be sacrificial and give to things of God? How are they going to know that if they don't know that? Use your debit card, that's fine, but know about what the money is. Know about it. They have never used a landline phone, and that's one of those things that probably never will have to. But the whole concept of using a phone, if you know the history of being able to communicate with a phone, then maybe you will even understand your cell phone a little bit. Thank you so much. But they've never seen one. They don't understand it. They've just always had their cell phone. And like I said, that's fine. But let them know where we came from. If you don't know where you got to the process of where you are, then you don't appreciate that and you don't understand the future. So in everything, you need to let them know the history. Give them the gift of history. Learn about the way others lived before them will help them to understand where they are today. Do Bible studies with them, which teaches them history of, I need one of them towels there, Casey. Teach them the history of the Bible. Let them know the stories in the Bible. You know, it's great to know about, we need to know about salvation and all that, but what was that built on? What about the Old Testament and the tabernacle and the sacrifices and why we got to where we are today? That's the history of our salvation. They need to know the history of our salvation so they can have a full knowledge of it. And when they're talking to somebody and they say, but why do you do that? Or I don't understand that. Well, in the Old Testament, and that's why we really want everybody to go through a Bible study, because it does that. You start from the beginning and you go through and you get the whole history of the Bible, and it's so enlightening. I've been doing a Bible study with on and off different people. But and a lot of them have said, oh, I didn't know about that, because you don't hear on a daily basis all of that, but you need it. You need it. So the gift of history. I have some other things for history here. I have I always tend to get ahead of myself, so I want to make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. But history, now this Bible, my mom will know what this Bible is. Or maybe she doesn't. This Bible my mom carried on her wedding day. Now, do you see weddings anymore where people carry, the bride carries a Bible down the aisle? I don't think I've been to one recently. But she carried the Bible with some flowers on it down the aisle when she got married. That's putting the Bible right there. Yes. Right in the beginning. Right. And that, to me, that's part of my history. Part of realize, and actually, that's right, Princess carried this too in her wedding. This flower, dead flowers. What parents do when they're unable to provide the tangible gifts to their children? They don't have the money, or they just don't feel that their children should have those certain things. You have to educate them. Give them the gift of education, knowing what things are, why we do the things we do. And Ephesians 6:4 says, and you fathers, or we'll say mothers today, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurturing and admonition of the Lord. So to me, this is, you don't just say to your children, no, don't do that, and that's it, forget it. You have to show them, bring them up in God and say, well, God has asked us in the Bible, Jesus has told us that this is what we need to do. And bring that into the do's and don'ts that you tell them. This is what would please Jesus. This is what would displease Jesus. So, I remember one time with Joshua, he was telling me something. It was something that happened, and in that, of course, kids always try to, and we do as adults, always try to tell things in the light that makes us look the best, So he was telling a story, and I just knew there was a little bit being left out. So I said, well, Joshua, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to pray and ask Jesus if that's the way it really happened. Well, immediately his story changed. Well, Mom, maybe it was, like this or that. But just let them know. That's showing them that God is hearing them. God is listening to them, and he knows everything they say, and whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's true or not true. They have learned that by saying, they know, oh, Mom has this connection with God. And there was different things, our son growing up, that I would say, I need to go check something in his room, and it might be something that I wasn't happy about, How'd you know about that? Well, God just told me, and I need to go look here. That's all. So he knew he couldn't get away with it because we would be asking God what to do. In Colossians 3:2, we talked about giving gifts and maybe not being able to give them everything. Colossians 3:2, it says, set your affection on these things above, not on things on the earth. And Philippians 4:11, not that I speak in respect of one, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am in, therewith to be content. And you know where they learn that lesson? From you. You know, if you can't be content with what you have, and today with everything, you do visually see everything, you know, and if they hear you saying, well, and those of you HGTV watchers will understand I'm saying, if I don't have an ensuite to my bathroom, and if everybody doesn't have a bathroom, and if I don't have this perfect yard, I cannot be happy. Because look, everybody has an ensuite. You know, and I didn't used to years ago I would have had no clue what an ensuite was, you know? But everybody has to have an ensuite. There's you hear that as like the one main thing. An ensuite and an open concept and a huge kitchen. And they tell you that, okay? This is what will make you happy. And if you are the parent, now granted, if you want to do that and you can, and I wouldn't mind having an ensuite. But if you just go out and, okay, we talked about money. If you go out and spend all this money to make yourself happy, because that's what HGTV says will make you happy, then you are teaching your children that everything they see, every toy they see, they have to have that because that will make them happy. So you have to learn in whatsoever state I am in, therewith to be content. And if you're not content with your situation, whether it's the way you want it or the way you don't want it, or if you're unhappy, if you're not content, they will never ever be content because they follow your lead. So we have to learn that we don't have to have, we have 4 children, we don't have to have 5 bathrooms. You know, I grew up in a house of 4 with 1 bathroom. My husband grew up in a house of 6 with 1 bathroom. My mom grew up in a house of 7 with 1 outhouse. So, you know, it's all relative, you know? And I never really thought about that we should have another bathroom. Why? We just take turns, you know? Now, I'm like, I'm glad I have 2. 1.5. That ensuite isn't there. If you see your child acting in a way that is displeasing to you and to God, then examine yourself and see if you are pleasing to your Heavenly Father. So give them the gift of the godly example. Should be room here somewhere for that. A godly example. Because the first thing they see when that baby first opens its eyes in the morning, oftentimes it's you that they see. And you start their day. You show them how life is going to go, how the day is going to go, and you set the tone for that day. So you have to be that godly example. Wake up singing them a song. And let the sun shine in is what I used to always do to Josh. I go in, open his blind, let the sun shine in, face it with a grin. He wasn't always happy about that. But that's what I did, you know. And we have to start the day off with something positive, something loving, something good. No complaints. They don't need, you know, kids really do have it tough sometimes. Even little ones. 4 or 5 years old. Now, to us, the things that they have that's tough isn't a big deal. But to them, it's a huge deal. And they feel the stress of it just like you feel the stress of your problems, which you think are so much bigger. Yeah. They feel stressed that they can't find the cup they always use for their water in the morning. That's stressful to them, you know? And you can't brush it aside and say, just get another cup, you know? But it's important to them. Well, let's find your cup. Where did you leave it last? Well, I don't know. Well, then I can't help you. But you have to take seriously how they feel. And you have to communicate with them and teach them communication. You know, we talked about how that's a lost art. When Josh was born, the nurses at the hospital said to me, when you get up in the morning with him, just tell him everything you're doing. Talk to him. So I get up and I have this little baby there and say, well, I'm vacuuming the floor now, and then I'm going to go over here and dust. And I just told him everything. The communication. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. Talking to him. And that is so important. Just like our daily talk to Jesus is important. We have to start our day. And Jesus, this is what's happening right now. This is what I'm bothered about right now. This is what I need help with. I really would appreciate if you could fix it. Or if I'm supposed to fix it, tell me what to do. That's what we need to start out with every day. Not, oh, another day. Oh, these problems are still there. They haven't gone anywhere. They're still there. What am I going to do? Oh, what is that going to do? Make you feel worse because you keep rehearsing in your mind your horrible problems. So just wake up and say, I've learned to be content in whatever state I'm in. I'm going to go with what I have because that's all I got. And do what I have to do because that's all I know. And follow God because that's what I know. And He will lead me and He will guide me. The last gift, the greatest gift. I'll have everybody stand. Oh, yes, you can still go ahead and stand. I wanted to read something to you. I forgot all my things. The one thing I saw that I missed back here is part of my history. Do you know what this is, Mom? This is my grandmother's hanky. She always had a hanky in her hand, no matter what. When she was, right now I can imagine her holding on to this with her Bible open. She couldn't see very well. So she would strain and strain to read 2 words, and she'd have this hanky and just wipe, and she'd have it in church. So I was so thrilled to be able to have one of her many hankies to remind me of that, because it's something to me speaks more than just a hanky. You see a hanky. I see a praying woman who led her children and then her grandchildren into the Word of God. She read that Bible no matter what, even though she could not hardly see it. But she did what she could. I'm going to read a little passage out of this. It's a book by Barbara Johnson, so I can give credit. Stick a geranium in your hat and be happy. These are old books. This lady is gone. But she said that she had something she doesn't know where it came from. It seems an angel slipped out of heaven and spent the day roaming around the earth. As the sun was setting, he decided he wanted to take along some mementos of his visit. He noticed some lovely roses in a flower garden, plucked the rarest and most beautiful, and made a bouquet to take back to heaven. Looking on a bit further, he saw a beautiful little baby smiling into its mother's face. The baby's smile was even prettier than the bouquet of roses, so he took that too. He was about to leave when he saw the mother's love pouring out like a gushing river toward the little baby in the cradle, and he said to himself, "Oh, that mother's love is the prettiest thing I have seen on earth. I will carry that too." He winged his way back to heaven, but just outside the pearly gates, he decided to examine his mementos to see how well they had made the trip. The flowers had withered, the baby's smile had faded, but the mother's love was still there, in all its warmth and beauty. He discarded the withered flowers and the faded smile, gathered all the host of heaven around him, and said, "Here's the only thing I found on earth that will keep its beauty all the way to heaven. It is a mother's love. There's some verses in the Bible, 1 Corinthians 13. Most of you are very familiar with this. I have it in the New King James Version here. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I can remove mountains, but have not love, and I inserted here, for my children, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love for my children, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long, is kind, and does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil. In other words, it's not selfish, especially when it comes to the children. You put them first in all things. If there's one piece of pizza left or whatever, you let them have it, Does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. The love of a mother never fails. But whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. And now abideth faith, hope, and love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. So as most of you have probably guessed by now, the greatest gift to give your children is love. And God bless all you mothers.
Sure, let's clap our hands and thank God and respond to this beautiful message today. We're going to sing in just a moment. Let me say, thank you, honey. Thank you, honey, for sharing this beautiful thought. And my wife shared something that can save you a lot of money today, because you can buy things for your children. In fact, you can spend a lot of money and give them what they want, and you'll never give them what they need. And no amount of money or worldly, tangible, carnal gifts can take the place of the things that my wife shared today that money cannot buy. The greatest of these is love. You spend a lot of money and you'll waste a lot of money, but the things that your kids will remember the most, how about it, right? How many got toys you wish you kept because now they're worth a lot of money, But you beat them up and you threw them away and you tossed them aside and they're gone. A lot of those tangible things. But the things that you remember most from your parents were the things they didn't buy you. It's the things that they did for you, the time they spent with you, the times you shared. And that's the greatest gift of all to your children, is the gift of love. Isn't that beautiful? God could have given us a lot of things, but he showed us these things are the most valuable. Let's sing, brother.